I am Pat Leach, the director of Lincoln City Libraries, and my job comes with an honorary title, which is Lincoln's Most Passionate Reader. And I know I might have to arm wrestle a few of you for that title, which we could do later. But today I'm here to share with you an innovation I introduced into my reading life several years ago, which is reading most of the books off of the American Library Association Notable Books list. Sounds a little bit dry, but I'd like to share a little story before I tell you about my reading. That is, my niece Sally, when she was a little girl, loved to be put to bed by my brother. And every night when he put Sally to bed, he told her Batgirl stories. And at the end of every Batgirl story was the line, and Batgirl looked just like Sally Leach. And on the days when Sally got up in the morning knowing her dad would put her to bed, she would at breakfast be, "Is Daddy putting me to bed?" And then at lunch, "Is Daddy putting me to bed?" And by dinner time, she was all agog about Daddy putting her to bed. You're thinking, how does that relate to her book? It relates in that those of us who geek reading, when we get up in the morning and start a book like this, start quivering. And we probably start thinking things like, okay, I was supposed to go to work today. I could call in sick. We might think, okay, I was supposed to get married today. I could put that off because we're in the thrall of a good book. So I brought along one of my favorites from this year's notable book list. This book is called The Hare with Amber Eyes. That's H-A-R-E, with Amber Eyes. A nonfiction book which gives me an opportunity to remind you how lovely nonfiction is. In this case, the author, Edmund de Waal, who is a ceramicist from England. He inherited a set of about 200 Japanese net skis, little figurines that sometimes hang on the end of a ribbon on a kimono. He knew really nothing about this set of figurines. As he began to explore how they came into his family, this ceramicist from Britain learned that he's the descendant of a fabulously wealthy Jewish grain merchant family from the mid-1850s. He found out that his Uncle Charles originally bought this set of figurines in Paris in the 1850s. His uncle's apartment full of Impressionist art from every name you've ever heard of that ever painted anything. He learned that Charles gave these Netsukis to a bride in his family. She took them to Vienna. In Vienna, eventually, as you know, the Nazis arrived there. And eventually they arrived at the Abruzzi mansion, where in addition to fabulous art and furniture, there was this set of figurines. And these are the figurines that the children loved because they could play with them. When the Nazis arrived at the mansion, furniture was thrown from floor to floor, art was taken away, everything was taken away. One member of the household, one maid, took all those figurines, though, and she stuffed them into a mattress. And eventually she returned them to the family after the war. And eventually Edmund de Waal inherited those figurines. This is his story of figuring out these 200 little things, where did they come from? And in the course of asking that question, what he learned really was, where did he come from? And I think that whole tingling feeling of a really great book started on about page 1 when I began The Hare with Amber Eyes by Edmund de Waal. And of course, today I want to remind you that this book is available to you through Lincoln City Libraries and your library card. I'll see you at the library. Thanks. As I mentioned earlier, I introduced an innovation into my reading life several years ago when I began reading the books from the American Library Association Notable Books list. It's part of my campaign to be Lincoln's most passionate reader, and it's also put me on a soapbox to encourage all of you to read nonfiction. In this case, I've brought another nonfiction book from this year's list called Citizens of London, the subtitle, The Americans Who Stood with Britain in Its Darkest, Finest Hour. I'm channeling Mrs. Berrio, my 4th grade teacher, for just a moment. Mrs. Berrio was one of those fabulous teachers who read aloud to us in a way that just made us beg for more. What she did that I will always picture her doing with her kind of frizzy red hair, there goes my library card, with her slightly frizzy red hair and her somewhat nasal voice, when she would introduce the next book she was going to read, she would say, "Oh, 4th graders, Nancy and Plum. I love this book. I would like to embrace Citizens of London, and I'd like all of you to embrace it too. Now, this book is about London. Think of what would be going on in London in about 1940. Lynn Olson has written this history of England essentially at that point standing alone against Germany. So nowhere else in Europe is going to be able to help England now. Germany is bombing England, bombing London regularly. They are desperate for the United States to help them out. Picture President Roosevelt, FDR, leading a country that's really pretty isolationist. After World War I, they really weren't interested in joining a war like that again. They've instituted a Lend-Lease program, but the price for England is really high, and the help seems pretty slight. Enter three men into London at this time. One of them is Guy Wynant, who takes over as ambassador after Joseph Kennedy leaves. Another is Averell Harriman, who is going to head up the Lend-Lease program. And the third is Edward R. Murrow, the journalist that we know so much about. The three of them in London at this time begin a campaign to work hard to pull together this case on England's behalf for the United States to enter the war. Now, what Lynn Olson does so well here is take this story, and she just gives it a trajectory. So the whole time we're moving forward here, and she's bringing in a variety of people, but focusing on those three men who were citizens of London at that time. And she has to employ the historian's magic, which is this. We look back and we know what happened in 1941. We are aware of the outcome of World War II. But in 1940 and in early 1941, they didn't know. And her gift really is to put us there and make us think a lot about our country and our involvement, and to wonder, what if the citizens of London had not been there at that time? So once again, I recommend to you a book from this year's American Library Association Notable Books list, Citizens of London by Lynn Olson. In this case, with your library card, you could check it out from Lincoln City Libraries, as well as download it to your e-reader through our website. Thank you.